Hello, welcome to this live stream all about vintage zero waste blouses. So it sounds very abstract, but it's basically a lot of blouses like that, often very traditionally made from all over the world, which use really clever techniques which waste very little fabrics, and there's different construction and drafting versions for a completely different look. So this is actually a little bit of a summer project, and you're all very welcome to join in. What I'm going to do over the next few weeks is, first of all, today look at some of these types of blouses. Then I will share a drafting tutorial, so how you can actually draft your own. I'm going to do it for this blouse. And then I'm also going to do a sewing tutorial, fabric choices, construction tips, things like that. If you're one of my lovely students on Pattern Cutting School, then you'll be able to join in live for drafting and sewing tips tutorial, and then they just go onto YouTube the week after. But I would love all of you or some of you to join me into making your own version of these type of blouses. So if you do, tag me on Instagram or put it in the comments below. I will share the proper schedule on YouTube and Instagram and on the community on Pattern Cutting School later this week. But I thought it'd be really nice, no pressure, very informal, sew along summer project. It should be very straightforward to make, and of course you can do lots of different versions, which I think will be really good fun. This is the first time I've done this, so hopefully it will go well. And I'm going to make myself one, and I would love to see the ones you're making, of course. So it'd be really nice July and August project. And hello Natalie, hello Laura, hello Erin. I hope your shoulder collarbone is fine. And hello Maria, hello to Puerto Rico, and hello Sandra to North Carolina. So let's have a look at some examples. I've pulled together some books and some real life examples of this sort of technique. I actually haven't got any online examples. Sometimes I go on Pinterest and find some, but there's actually lots of them out there. It's some of the patterns I shared a few weeks back for the vintage DIY patterns work are also zero waste. But I wanted to concentrate on styles where we use gathering instead of darts, where you use zero waste geometric shapes, but you use gathering to actually create something which isn't too boxy. Some of these are a bit boxier, which is, of course, if you want that, that's actually really nice. I love the sort of work where utility where is really boxy. But what I love about the examples I've chosen is that sort of clever gathers or tucks or smocking actually adds garments which aren't too oversized. So what I will do, I will put this on just to show you what I'm talking about. And hello Kath, hello to Mississippi, and hello Dolphin as well. Lovely to have you all. And let me know, will you be taking part in this summer blouse stitch along? Let me know in the comments. I know it's or in the chat. I know it's sort of quite a specific style, but if you, for example, did this is actually from Mexico. I have a feeling it's from the 50s, 60s, because I think it came from my aunt, and my aunt was there in the late 50s, early 60s. So I think it's from that time, because we haven't got any family connection otherwise to Mexico. It could, of course, been bought somewhere else. Who knows? It's probably made. I'm just thinking. Sorry, I'm going through my mind. This might have been made for a tourist market as well. Who knows? But this is, of course, it's sort of quite traditional. It has all this embroidery. Another thing this is called is peasant blouses, but always it's a good. It's sort of a good short form, but I think there's actually quite a lot of skills in there. It's quite, you know, they can be. I always think like peasant is used a little bit or can be used. And this, I think it can be just a nominator, like this is sort of what you'd have used in traditional agricultural communities, which is true, but it's also sort of to nominate like high culture and low culture. So I'm not, I get the name, I always find it a little bit weird, but it's maybe because I am partly of a peasant stock, so. And Sandra is saying, I think the stitch along sounds lovely. I would like to participate. Wonderful. That's great. That's what I want. Lots of you joining me and us making lots of lovely blouses. And hello, Jen. Lovely to have you. So let's actually look at this blouse and I will stop chatting. So what you can see, this is it's embroidered, it's quite decorative, all these sort of things. But of course, if you made this completely out of a single fabric, it'd be just a nice gathered blouse. Or for example, if you made the body out of one color and then you color blocked it in, or instead of this has got embroidery all over, you could use piping and it would have a different look. So I just wanted to put it on and show you how I see it. Let's have a look at the back. So you can see it's the same at the back and it's just got a nice length. I'm wearing really I'm wearing my work trousers, so they're not very flattering. But I normally wear it with high-waisted jeans, and then you can sort of tuck it in at the front and leave it loose at the back, or lose it completely loose. And that's one version. So this is made in Mexico, but I think it's actually quite a universal way of doing it. I will show you some more examples. I've also gotten Indian version, which is out of a super fine fabric. I want to show you too, just because this is the same sort of technique, but it looks completely different. And this would actually be really nice as a dress, I think, like a shirt style dress. It's always very tricky dressing yourself on the camera because it's not a mirror. So you can see, I'm wearing it the right way around. I'm missing a button, but you can see this is actually quite a nice style. And again, this is 90% made, oh no, it's completely made of straights. You can see if I lift my arms. And again, they've used a similar technique, but because it hasn't got the gathers, it looks, you know, it looks like a sort of, I know it's got the base see-through fabric, the muslin, and the embroidery, which gives it a slight Indian flair. But again, that's the great thing about looking at traditional garments. You can interpret them as you want when you draft them. And I think it's also one of those things that these have been reinterpreted again and again through history. So it's not like you're taking like a bishop's mantle and making streetwear out of it. This is something which has always been worn, always reworked, reinterpreted by different countries, different cultures over time, which I think why they're so interesting, why there's so many variations, and why it's so nice to play with them. And I think that's, again, I know I moaned about the name peasant, but that's where of course it came from, because most of the population, most of us, would have been peasants back in time. So there wasn't this sort of high and practical fashion. It was sort of practical clothes, but it didn't mean you didn't put in your love and your effort. So this is Hungarian, from the 70s, I think. This is actually not a true zero race, but I wanted to show you again. This is, I will put them flat to show you the details later. This is a bit of a hybrid because it has lots, if I lift up my arms, it has lots of the sort of same versions and same sort of shaping through gathering, but it's actually not completely square. All the ones I've shown you up to now, the two, are made out of squares and rectangles, and all the corners are basically square. And the first one is completely like that. The second one has a round neck, so it's a little bit cheating. This one has actually a raglan sleeve. Um, but apart from that, again, it uses sort of similar techniques where you have an extra side bit which helps you with shaping. And again, this is a really nice, it's a bit like a blouson. I could imagine this as a jacket. So this again is made out of super fine cotton, and of course all these fabrics help with draping it. But imagine if you made this out of a silk jersey or something, or like a viscose jersey, but a really drapey. Doesn't even have to be jersey or knit. If you made this out of a really nice viscose, it could be like a sort of nice jacket. So there are lots of variations. I'm going to now read your comments. Dolphin says, love the white top. Yes, so that's the second one. And Natalie likes that as well. Yeah, that's the reason I included that, because the other two examples are very exuberant, colorful, decorative. This is really simple. And that's like a sort of method which is used. This is Indian, all over, going up from India, all over Asia, down to the Middle East, and then also down into Europe. So it's a technique which is used everywhere. And if you went, I think Natalie will know, I think a lot of Georgian Regency men's shirts have a very similar construction. So it's completely timeless, completely international, and that's why you find lots of variations and you have lots of fun making it your own as well, which is lovely. And hello, Butter Roll Boutique. And Dolphin is also loving the raglan tunic. Yeah, the last one, which I so it's like a blouson. So what I like about this is that it's quite sort of rounded, because all the other ones are quite square here. This is sort of quite rounded because all the gathers start from the neckline. So it's a completely different look. Oh, getting lots of love for the Hungarian raglan. Natalie and Sandra are loving it as well. Natalie is asking, is it embroidered? Let's switch over to a flat camera so we can actually look at it properly. I can show you. So this is the Hungarian one, and it's always shocking because this has been in a cupboard for a few years, and how the white it's basically yellow, so it needs to be very carefully hand washed. And I hand washed it once before, and the reason, you can see it if I hold it up to the camera, can you see all these brown dots? That's actually a metallic thread. So this, I think somebody else before me hand washed it, but this I think used to be goldish, gold, silver. I would quite like silver with the red and blue, but I have a feeling it would have been sort of emerald. But yes, it's got very typical and very traditional embroidery. And then what I really like is that all the seams, if you look into them, which are actually machine stitched. I think so anyway. They might be I think they're stitched first, and when they're finished in this really nice which is types of blanket stitch. So it becomes a highlight. And then of course at the cuffs you got again some sort of smocking. They actually put an elastic thread in, so it has this sort of slight modernities, but all of these styles it's sort of varying history, but you can update it really nicely, and just even you can keep a nod to history, or you can just use the details you want. And you can see all the gathers there. And if I hold up the collar, what I quite like about it, look how yellow it is. That's bad. That needs a wash. It's a complete square, which gives you a sort of quite drapey collar. And you can see how everything is embroidered. And I assume it's Hungarian just because we've got friends there. That's why I assumed where it came from. If you want to correct me on that country code or what it means, please do. Yes, but this is like, so if you have a look at it a bit further out, You can see, let's zoom out even more. You can see I called this a cheats version. It's not a cheats version, it's just different techniques, because it's actually got an angle here. When the whole front is one piece, and then you can see on the side, God, it's very yellow. You can see it's got that sort of, which is basically a gusset, which allows you more movement. And then again at the back, it's got the very basic raglan. And then again, the sleeve is a complete rectangle, and then it has just a grown on sort of triangle for the raglan shoulder bit. So that's the sort of raglan one. This one, which is really flat, and I want to show you some examples. So this is from India, and you can see you've got your central bodice panel, which is the same at the front and the back. However, that goes slightly, I think it's near your normal shoulder point, how your bodice is, but it goes in a little bit. And then you basically got your sleeve, which is, I think, a complete rectangle. Yeah, can you see that it's a complete rectangle? But then what they've done is they've gathered the top half in just slightly. Can you see? Actually, you can see it there, and that gives you the what would be the sleeve head a little bit on a conventional sleeve, a satin sleeve. So it's got basically, it rounds off around your shoulder rather than being completely flat. And then what would be the undersleeve construction? Let me get my sleeve. So this rectangle is basically this section, like that, but as a rectangle, and then it gets gathered in. And then instead of having the under part as one, you basically got this section, which is that part of your front and back sleeve. But then it, of course, sorry, it's not this part, it's literally that sort of part, but it extends down on the sleeve. So the sort of sleeve comes up and forms part of this. And then we also got a rectangle. Did I say it right? No, sorry. That's why you need to consolidate this part, the long strip which goes in the bodice. It comes up from the bodice, and then it sort of replaces this part as well. And then you also got the rectangle. So you basically end up with a sleeve which is not quite as wide as your satin sleeve. And then part of this section underneath basically gets replaced. So it's a little bit of a, you can see it's basically a square armhole. So there's sort of bits coming in and out, not the whole one, apologies. That would have been if you had a strip, and there are some, which is why I suddenly completely got confused. But you can see how we got basically, that's the sort of timeless, very old way of pattern cutting. They use only rectangles, so you have all the seams of straight of grain, they're really strong, and then we just add bits instead of the curves there. Let's have a look at what you are saying. Dolphin is saying, please draft the right tunic. So we got a fan for this. I might do, if there's, I put a poll out, if there's lots of votes for both of them, I might do both, because I think it'd be really interesting. And Natalie is saying, on the white tunic, the garrowing at the sleeve is reminiscent of 18th century menswear. Yes, I think I couldn't find any menswear under, like, so shirts of that period in my books, but I assumed. And Laura says, I like the tunic and the way they've done the sleeve. Yeah, it's sort of quite intuitive how you imagine they would have, you you can imagine if you just got some fabrics and you played around, this is probably how you would have done the sleeve, the garment, as the Indian tunic. And then over time, rather than having a really oversized one, they made it a bit narrower, and then it was really tight probably and you couldn't move, so they added the gathers, so made it a bit wider again, and then they sort of added in underneath stuff underneath, so you have that sort of movement, which is then in over time, as fabric gets cheaper as well, or more readily available, then gets replaced by really very slight curves to begin with, and then over time, how I said, the the sort of gussets replaces this part, so you can imagine it's sort of starting out just as a rectangle with a slight curve, and the curve getting bigger and bigger as there's less gathers, and when you're adding in these bits and then being stuck on, the more industrialized the weaving process becomes, and the less precious fabric is, because I think all these examples, like their history shows of how, if you had to grow your own cotton or linen or hemp, would have been in Europe, and then spin it, or your wool, spin it, and then weave it, you don't want to cut out curves. And of course, again, because it's so precious, having straight seams only means it would have lasted a lot longer, because everything is on the straighter grain. There's no weak points as such. So it makes complete sense that all garments were constructed like that. I find it really interesting, because it's like living history. I'm going to show you another example of this blouse now, but this time coming not from India, but from, I think it's Jordan or Palestine. It's because the book is called, it's the clothes and jewelry from Jordan and Palestine, and I wanted to show you this one. If I zoom in again, there's quite a few of these types in there, but can you see this jacket, which is, well, 1925, but you can see how, again, it's got exactly the same sleeve and the same construction underneath, but what they have done, you can see it gets a little bit more, like, it's changed to the side. Instead of it being square at the shoulder, they got a slightly, looks like an angle shoulder, and then maybe a little bit of a yoke. So you can see how that sort of, again, it gives you a slightly better fit. And if I go back a bit, like, there's another example here on this one, is like completely made out of rectangles, and the white tunic is like super summery and super light, and here you can see this is made out of yeah, so this is from Jordania, so that's black cloth with lots of gold cords, so it would have been like a proper jacket, very luxurious, but also a lot warmer and harder. But there's this, I really found it interesting just to see the variation. You can see how different regions over slightly, different times, the same, basically the same garment constantly gets slightly changed when over hundreds of years, it gets reinterpreted again by different countries as people move, as you bring different traditions with you, and like completely different. Now we're going up to Scandinavia, but these are the clothes of Finland, and this is quite an old book, so it's got illustrations only, but can you see here again, I think this is exactly the same construction. You can see it's got a completely straight armhole. It's got the litter would have probably been tucks rather than gathers, at the shoulder, completely straight shoulder, and then the sleeves are just tucked in. So you can see how it's a real sign that these techniques are really universal, which is why they work so well. Natalie saying, you wonder sometimes who came up with the idea of the modern sleeve head. Yes, I think it's probably everybody over time did interpretations of that. Natalie says she's going to make a jacket in a similar design to the ones I just showed you to an event I'm going to. That sounds fantastic. And Dolphin is saying the Max Tilke books are full of info tour costumes. Yes, they're amazing books. I've got some copies from it. I thought I'd show you something new for a change, because I think I've sort of gone on about them a little bit too much. But yes, the Max Tilke books are fantastic, and you can also get them quite cheaply. So they're great. And they have lots of examples like the Jordanian and Palestinian ones I've just showed you. But it's just sort of really fascinating how, you know, lots of different countries have the same sort of sleeve construction, which sort of speaks to it working really well, and also being sort of very conscientious of fabric choices. I'm going to show you two more examples. One is from a book called Smocking and Smocks, or Smocks and Smocking, which is very much about the English edition, and which is again a pastoral, so again peasants and agricultural. Communities, but again you can see here, you can sort of see how compared to the, you know, if you lay the Indian blouse next to it, can you see this has got that, and that's exactly the same, and again heavily embroidered but made out of exactly the width of a cloth. So again, this probably the Indian part of the reason why we have this width here and the inserts on the side is because this was probably the width of the cloth which was woven on a very narrow loom. So it makes a nice design choice later on, and it sort of leads to construction, but again it's probably very much dictated by the loom, which of course means that this is to a certain degree opposite what I always say. The great thing about pattern cutting is that you make the clothes exactly to fit you and your body and your proportions. For some of these garments, of course, it would have been originally the opposite, that all the garments would have been the same width of cloth, and then you just would have gathered it more or less depending on your size, and that's why they're quite loose and relaxed. So the same method would work probably, you know, lots of different people, and also, you know, your whole life you would have probably worn the same garment, and then it could accommodate your changing body throughout. So it's sort of quite interesting how, yeah, different, like, you know, different reasons, different limitations of cloth and so on. Let's go back to the book. So I just wanted to show you this. I've done a full review of this before because I think it's a fantastic book. I put it in the description, but you can see they have got all the layouts on how it's made. The interesting about these is basically front and back is cut out of one piece, and then they've got a yoke to reinforce the shoulder, because of course you would have carried stuff, and that's one of the really weak points. But again, you can see how it's sort of similar constructed. They don't always have that side strip, but quite lots of comparable techniques in this book as well, and lots of variations, so which is what I love. The last book I wanted to show you is, okay, Natalie raised a really good point. The nice thing about the Indian tunic is that the sleeve doesn't have a seam down the shoulder and center of the arm as you have on a dolman block. Yes, so I should have pointed that out. So this one, can you see? She's talking about the sleeve here, and it's basically like a satin sleeve. There's no seams at the front, at the top, and it's only got your underarm seam. So it works very much like your sleeve block in that case. While on a classic dolman sleeve, you have a seam there, and also that sometimes allows you to curve it. But even on some of the blocks, you have a seam up there, which is of course completely unneeded. And if we now go to a different country again, if you look at kimonos, so the Japanese jacket coat, again, very much defined by the very narrow width looms and how it's woven. So that sort of gives you the width of your bodice and your sleeves. But then again, I think often there's no shoulder seam. So the whole, there might be a shoulder seam. Actually, there is a shoulder seam. And then, of course, you got like a straight collar satin. But then the sleeve again is cut out of the width of the fabric. And Saskia is saying, is the gusset on the Indian blouse the same as the Hungarian blouse? So let's have a look. It's not, which is why I think Natalie said that's a really interesting gusset. So let's compare gussets. So we've got the Indian in a way is a hybrid. So you got the small gusset there with the grown on bodice. I'm going to put the blue and white one there as well. So you can see the blue and white one basically is a slightly simplified version. So rather than having a narrow sleeve, a small gusset, and then this is basically your bodice block. So this strip is basically, I think, your bodice block and maybe a little bit of your sleeve. This sort of I might have said that wrong earlier, I just realized. And then this gusset is sort of, again, this region. Basically what's this sort of region here is replaces this and that. So it's like a sort of geometric drawing of your blocks. So you can see the blue and white one is a much simplified version of it, and that's enabled because there's so much gathers. So it's looser, and a lot of the shaping and softness is done through gathers in the fabric. And then the Hungarian one, let's hope it's Hungarian. Could be from the Czech Republic, but I think colors are quite Hungarian as well. This one, it's got a completely different gusset. So on there, it's actually, try to hold it next to it. So can you see on the white Indian one, you got a strip, and then you got something set out. On here, are they on top? You can see you have the same strip, just narrower, but then instead of it going to the side, it actually continues going straight. So can you see how that actually allows you a lot more movement? So that blouse, the Indian blouse, can only move to 90 degrees. The Hungarian, by that triangle being attached, moves slightly further up. So which is why this one isn't zero waist. This is sort of a step further, where you go away from pure 90 degrees rectangles and squares to something with some shaping. So some triangles and things. So it's sort of really nice to see how it develops. I'm quickly going to draw it out to finish off. And then next week, what I will do is on the pattern cutting school, do a tutorial, one of the drafting tutorials. And I might record some as well, because I always think I'm slightly more coherent when it's recorded, because I'm not trying to at the same time talk to you I'm not that great at multitasking after all. But the Mexican one, And actually, I quickly thought of this is why I'm not good at live, so I get distracted. Look at this. This is in the smocking book, and this is a Ukrainian blouse, and it's got exactly the same construction as the Mexican blouse. So I found that fascinating. So either there has been some sort of, cross-country influence, or it's the sort of universal technique which has been used on all of them. So the Mexicans, literally, it's your sleeves are like this, they get folded over. Then we've got our neckline like this, and then our other sleeve, so it's all rectangles. And then the bodice is another rectangle, and then it ends up looking, of course, like a nice blouse. It gets gathered in, and then this gets gathered in, and then of course the last component is the gusset, which is a rectangle, a square, which gets put in at an angle. So everything is constructed at just right angles, and then the last one is a gusset which gets folded diagonally and then put in. So that's the Mexican blouse. The let's do the Indian first. The Indian one is a little bit different. So again, you can see that's sort of slightly moving away from complete rectangles, because we've got a bodice which is like this, with then we've got the sleeve like this, and then of course it is folded. So this is your fold line, the same on for the other sleeve. And then we've got a panel at the front like this, and then again we've got the same gusset which gets folded diagonally. So it's a slightly different construction, and then I think this is probably the sort of most, because it ends up, it's all rectangles, but it ends up looking like, a quite, I don't want to use the word conventional, but it looks like a blouse drafted using curved patterns, which I think why this is sort of it works really well. I think I've made a version of this years ago to sell at the music festival. And then the Hungarian to finish off. That's a little bit more complicated. So the Hungarian, okay, so the front and the back are basically like this. Probably straight here, and then it's just gathered in. It might be slightly going up, and then of course it's got a line for the front, but the back is exactly the same. And then the sleeves are like that, and the sleeves basically form part of a neckline like this, and then it gets folded along here, and it gets gathered into here. And then the gusset is different because it's this shape, and then this is a side seam. So you can see that's a little bit more how we would do a normal dolman sleeve or raglan sleeve pattern. They're still all mostly straights, and the shaping is done through gathers. But this is what I would call strip gusset. So I use that for gusset sleeves as well, because it's a really nice way of adding movement without having to insert your conventional gusset, which is always a little bit risque, having to go into that point there. But you can see how the three different blouses, you can see it's all goes down to rectangles and squares. They all have that sort of gusset add-on, which of course allows you to create a sleeve, because I think if you just did a tube going in, you could be very welcome to try it. You end up with quite a restrictive sleeve, or you have to go quite big to counteract it. And with gusset sort of is a compromise, but you get a more neatly fitting sleeve, but you get also the movement on a wider sleeve. So I hope you enjoyed these different vintage, and actually I think historical would be a better term for this one, because we've gone back probably, I think it's always like, again, with these traditional, especially, you know, what is called sort of normal people's clothing, and there isn't that much documentation, so it might have been in the background of paintings or stuff which has survived, but a lot of it's of course survived through the examples being passed on from generations to generations. So you wouldn't have a big oil painting, you know, showing all the, you know, if you think about Elizabeth I, the beautiful garments on Holbein, this is of garments which they're the examples from the beginning of the 20th century are basically letting us glimpse into hundreds of years of skills being passed on, traditions being passed on. So it's a really fascinating way of basically connecting with our past for all of us, wherever we're from. And I'm sure there's a lot more examples if you go around. As I started mentioning Japan, I know parts of, I think, Java. So again, going towards Polynesia, they have something with a gusset, again, where you have a garment which over time has evolved from something very square to something really fitted, and then it has that gusset in there. So that's, again, I think that's sort of the everyday garment, depending on what we would have done, what our job was, our life was, although the world has a sort of similarities and differences. It just makes it so interesting, and which is so lovely to interpret anew and get inspired by. At the same time, also maybe connect to where we come from, which is nice. So these are the ones I wanted to show you. I hope you found them interesting, and then I will put out a proper plan of what I'm planning and how you can get involved. And from what I heard, the feedback, lots of you loved the more understated, like sort of very simple, more yeah, sort of, it's, I don't think it's simple, I think it's very clever, but it's less decorative and less blousy than the blue and white one. So I will do one, I will do a draft tutorial for this probably, and this, and then a sewing guide as well, and we talk about fabric choices as well. I need to work out the last little details, but I will put that on everywhere, YouTube, Instagram, and the pattern cutting school, and probably email you as well tomorrow, and how you get involved. And that probably will go through a whole of August, and we can make it together. You could, you know, you could do lots of amazing embroidery. You could repurpose old tablecloths, old embroidered fabrics, or make it really simple and update it to suit your own style. Whatever you want to do, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you make with it. But I will be back with more details tomorrow, and I will either see you live or record it next week. But that's it for me for today. Thank you so much for joining me, everybody, and I see you soon. Bye.